And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting workshop at Qureos. I am Hadia Malik, and I thank you for being a part of this workshop. Before we begin, I'd like to share a bit about the Qureos platform. If this is your first time here, Qureos is a platform where we aim to transform 100 million careers by having apprentices get bite sized learning from experienced mentors and then put them together with projects where you can apply the learned concepts. We've got multiple cohorts and workshops available on the platform, and we also have many new learning streams coming up. So be a part of the Curious Tribe and accelerate your learning journey by signing up at www.curious.com. Today, in this workshop, we will be talking about financial technology, more commonly known as fintech. Fintech is any technology that delivers financial services such as online banking, mobile payment apps, so on and so forth. In emerging markets like Pakistan, especially, fintech aims to change the way consumers and businesses access their finances and compete with traditional financial services. Our speaker for today will be sharing more on this during the session. We have been lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Owais Shaikh, CEO of HubPay. A very brief sort of introduction of Owais would be that he is a serial entrepreneur and a growth hacker who is known to be a passionate industry leader. He has a track record of successfully managing multiple businesses and being on the board of multiple organizations, along with being a global disruptor. With over 18 plus years of financial industry experience within the space of banking, fintech, product innovation, digital transformation, and data science, and he has 12 plus years of software development experience in Pakistan and UK. He also has strong working relationships within the mobile operators space across Pakistan, Middle East, and Africa. Today, Owais is also providing technology and growth hacking to organizations across Africa, Middle East, and North America as a consultant. Along with all the above, he currently has businesses involved in networking, data centers, call centers, software development, organizational transformation, aviation, and general indenting. Thank you so much, Owais, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Hadia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Before we delve into a conversation with Owais, I'd like to mention that every participant that's joining us, either that's on LinkedIn or Facebook, feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Just share your questions in the comment section, and we'll be sure to share them with Owais, and he'll answer that accordingly. Also, this session is going to be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all of you. So, Owais, before we begin, we'd really like to know about HubPay. What is it that you're doing with it, and what is the problem that it is solving?
All right. First of all, it's very important to understand HubPay is a fintech based out of the UAE. I'm not the owner of HubPay. The global CEO of HubPay is Kevin Kilty. I represent HubPay in Pakistan, and we're looking towards expanding into many other countries as well. What HubPay's core competency is that we work in the remittance piece, and what we like to look at is how we can do financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is a very important part of what we believe, and the best part about HubPay is the soul of the organization. The soul of the organization is fantastic. You see, everyone in the company wants to do something good. They're looking towards how they can actually improve people's lives, and that's what makes it so good. You look at what we're giving as to our customers in the UAE. Currently, we're not charging them anything for remitting funds across to different countries, and that helps a lot with the individuals, and thus giving us much greater growth than other fintechs in the region. Something that you must keep in mind is when you're approaching people, there is a problem that needs to be solved in the financial world. It's not that you're trying to just do a Me Too product. And that's where we're coming out with different things, which will make it actually easy and more efficient for individuals to be able to actually build further from there. So it's a very important thing that you must be looking at when you're looking at what's being brought into the market, who are you actually approaching, and what is it that you want to bring in for that particular customer. One size does not actually fit all, as what people generally believe. So now coming to the problem that we're trying to solve, we're looking at how we can bring financial inclusion to the market. What are we looking at? We're looking at the entire population that we're going to be working with. And in particular in Pakistan, you're looking at a population of just over 200 million individuals. Now, when you're looking at that, you have to look at factors as education, as what are the access points that they have? What is the means to finance that they will have? There is a very large unbanked population of Pakistan. how do we reach those customers? How do we bring finances to them? How do we make it applicable for them to be easily be able to use that fund? How can they have access to it sitting in the most remote areas in Pakistan? And then at the same time, be able to have access to finance. When you're saying access to finance, you're not just talking about access to their own money, but the ability to actually get loans from the market and then, kind of build up over there. When you're doing all of this, there are very important factors which come in and plug in over here. And one of the key factors that plugs in is what is the acceptability of what is available to them? What is the ecosystem? The second factor comes in is the education factor. We look at the literacy rate of Pakistan and we go by the UN definitions, which is simply anyone who can sign their name is essentially literate. Does that really mean that that person is literate? No. And that 56% really shrinks down when you really look at true literacy rates. When you're looking at the true literacy rates, you also have problems of saying, hey, what's going to take impact of? What is actually going to sell? How are they actually going to communicate with the system? There was a study back in 2007 that the State Bank had done, and that's how we kind of worked towards encouraging people for using ATMs. And that was basically putting the buttons in specific spots and then educating the customer by memory rather than anything else. And that actually worked. And that took leaps and bounds in terms of taking Pakistan from a complete cash-based mechanism to a slightly more electronic-based mechanism of dispersal of cash. That reduced the pricing of per transaction for the banks, because if a customer is going to a counter, obviously it costs a lot more money to take care of a customer, whereas going to an ATM. So Hadia, that's basically what, as Happe, we're looking to resolve. We're looking to see how we can bring financial technologies which are the most efficient, the most easy to use, and at the same time, the most inclusive.
Great. And I really like the fact that you've mentioned the inclusive part and you've also mentioned the literacy part, because in Pakistan, we see people aren't literate. And when it comes to financial literacy, that's very, very less. So kudos to Happe and you guys that you guys are bringing this to Pakistan. So I'd also like to touch upon a broader concept of fintech and just sort of know how important financial inclusion is and how is fintech changing the world.
Well, you see, fintech is changing the world by. There was a concept once upon a time that we started developing while I was in the bank, and we said banking is no longer going to be the way it is done today. You're not going to have the brick and mortar mechanism, and there's a lot of banks out there and globally that are working towards just going towards a digital branch mechanism. The idea is not to change the rules of banking. The idea is to change the way you bank, the way you do transactions. Right now, let's go back to the Stone Ages. How did people do transactions? They did transactions through, barter. Then they went on to creating the Iron Age brought the trade of coins, etc. And then you move to paper money. Then you move to plastic money, and now you're moving to crypto and digital funds as well. But the core basics of a credit and debit stay the same. Now, the idea is, what are you going to actually build from there? What is it that you're going to actually take out as the next stage, right? So you're going to remove the brick and mortar. You're not going to be meeting people constantly to do your transactions. Dependency on a branch manager or a financial consultant will reduce because of the simple fact of availability of information. Now, that availability of information should also, in turn, make your rupee go to the maximum available limit. That it should not be just restricted to just what I have in my wallet, or it might be saying, hey, you can do a transaction in multiple ways to take that money and make it extend even more than what it existingly is doing for you. Also, time value of money. Transaction speeds will change dramatically. Now, when I want to give someone a payment, I don't have to think twice. I can actually just go on an app and transfer funds immediately for any transaction that I've done. You could do transactions globally. Right now, you look at wallets and transactions just locally. But when you start looking at a global perspective, things will change in the trade world as well. Someone sitting in a house in, let's say, Ganju Thakkar, which is a city in Pakistan, could probably sell a clay good to someone sitting in North America and receive the funds. And there can be different mechanisms of which how that transaction can take place, the complete ecosystem of how that delivery would take place, and there's so much more to it. Now, When we start talking about just these things and we look at the world changing, it's also going to change of how you interact with one another. As a kid, you got your allowance in cash. Next time, you just get a message, right? So all of those things will change, and everyone's interaction. When you go to now, there's a video by Visa where they're showing how individuals are actually in a line making payments through cards, and one person comes in with cash, and that slows down the entire line. But that rhythm, the speed, and all of that changes. Now, when these things start to change in terms of speed, trade will start increasing. Trade will start increasing, the options will increase. The quality will automatically require to go up because you won't be subjected to just one option anymore. You will be able to go to e-commerce places and find different items which you can buy. And then against that item, you'll have competition. So you will potentially see price wars. You will potentially see much better products. And what else it will give is the opportunity to individuals who don't right now have the opportunity to go to a marketplace to sell their items. And this is where true inclusion starts coming in. Let's be realistic, okay? Uh, we have now in Pakistan started working towards something which I'm very proud of, which is inclusion of the female gender as well, all right? And that is fantastic. When you look at it, the population is nearly 50-50 now. You want a country to progress. If you don't give opportunities to the females of the country to actually build further, you're not going to be able to progress. And that is something that everyone needs to start realizing. And as we realize that, these type of products with our, let's say, our cultural factors will allow that to actually come a step forward as well. Yes, I do think that women have great potential. We have done different studies over the years that I've been working in the financial industry, and we've seen that women actually pay loans much better, and they're much more careful with money. And that's another thing that comes into play. When people become more careful with money, when people are becoming more careful with money, it's very important to understand what makes a country progress. You talk about saving index. A country which is progressive will have a much larger saving index, which creates a much larger national kitty for reserve funds, right? People will stop using cash, and this cash in circulation will reduce. Thus, demand and supply starts changing over there. The cost of funds start coming down in terms of currency evaluations. So there's a lot more money that is in the ecosystem than in circulation. So you can see, and this will also, at the end of the day, also result in other such factors as reducing terrorism. People wonder how that would happen. The reduction in terrorism will actually happen because of the simple fact that money will be traceable. You will actually be able to get to the end cause of end user who actually spent the money, where he spent the money, and then you will be able to trace back all the way and catch each and every individual faster and quick and stop them preemptively rather than waiting for an incident to happen. So there's a lot of great things that can happen through this. The thing that people think is that with digital and fintech coming in, that means KYC goes out the window. No, it doesn't. In fact, it actually doubles down. You actually use much more better technical mechanisms to actually do further KYC. You use different means to get a customer onboarding done. You use different sources of information to actually collate that and be able to identify whether the customer is correct or not. Today, people travel abroad. Their entire detail is put down on their passport. So you can actually pull out all that information as and when they're going from country to country, and that starts creating their travel profile. Similarly, there's a lot of other information that's available, which creates the various profiles across different entities, different mechanisms, and you also make it easier for individuals to get that information, thus being able to do a lot more inclusion. As a final point, when things are coming and becoming cheaper, how do you make things cheaper? Now, for instance, you do bill collections. Or a company to collect bills is a very expensive process. And if you take it into the digital ambit and you allow people to start paying their bills online, and you encourage that even further, the cost comes down. So if that cost comes down, you could potentially say that even in a later stage, as you're reducing the cost of collections, you might actually lower the cost of the utility itself. So there's a lot of things that come in with financial inclusion and fintechs, and there are a million use cases. There's not enough players in the market. So you'll always have space to do something new, and it'll always help improve society in general.
That's amazing that you've shared in depth what financial inclusion means in Pakistan. And I'm really, really happy to know that the women force is also being incorporated into the workforce. And the fact that you mentioned, I'm really happy to know that women are more keen to return loans faster as compared to men. So I'd also like to have your take on what you think about the mobile wallets that are springing up. Every telecom sector that in Pakistan, they have their microfinance set up as well. So what do you have to say about that?
You see, uh, there was a debate once upon a time that will banks buy telcos or will the telcos buy banks? Now, you see, the reach of a bank is much smaller than the reach of a telco. The telco, now let's say if we were to take all the customers that we have in the banking industry, we wouldn't be able to compete with even one of the telcos. And that's where the challenge comes in. They actually have the ability to reach a customer. Now, when they have that ability to reach a customer, that means they can get more customers on board. They can do more marketing. They can do more information. They can do more learning for the customer as well. So it's a very important trade-off which is over there. Furthermore, when you're talking about the different wallets in the market and what everyone's coming with, there are different use cases, and those use cases will create different solutions for different customers. You have a number of wallets which are being introduced in Pakistan, and I think the State Bank is doing a fantastic job in basically encouraging other fintechs to come to Pakistan and build up from there. And each fintech that comes in is coming in with a separate use case. Now, those use cases will result in different sections and different segments of the population to gain benefits, right? Like, for instance, if you look at a remittance-based use case, that would help individuals in far-flung areas to be able to easily receive their money in their wallets rather than having to have to go to different banks or branches, subject to obviously all the ways and regulations that the state bank sets. Now, all of this put together creates more opportunity, more money in the system, more money in the ecosystem. How do you make it work? Then again, we come back to the subject of the reach. The reach is a very important factor. When you're talking about reach, you look at what is one thing that every Pakistani has now. Well, not every, but majority of the Pakistanis have, and that's a cellular phone. The cellular density in Pakistan is 85% or and more. So when you're talking about a country with 85% cellular density, now you start talking about different things like how many smartphones are there? How many of those smartphones have access to internet? What can you do to actually reach those customers? And then what are the type of products you can offer each one of those customers? Again, there's a lot of data science that goes behind all of this, and you can actually see what is the information that you can get from the different sources and what type of products you can create for each different segment that you do. When you talk about the different wallets again, there is so much to do. And there is, right now, if you look at all the wallets in Pakistan, that's a great number. But what are the number of transactions happening on it? What are the real use cases that are being utilized? So those are the things that we need to start looking into. And as and when we start looking into all of that, we'll be able to create ecosystems which will result in, even in the agricultural sector, a complete end-to-end ecosystem that connects every little dot that comes in for a farmer from the time he sows his seed to the time he actually plows the land. He will get everything, and the entire thing should just flow through a system. And that system needs to be created, and a lot of people are working towards different mechanisms to create that. I feel that there is a confusion to also think that fintech means to have a wallet. That's not necessary. Fintechs can have different use cases, which might not even lead to a wallet, but create mechanisms for which financial transactions are happening. And that is what a fintech would be actually, rather than just simply a wallet.
Yeah, that's great to know your take on fintech. Since we're talking about how mobile wallets have come in, and this, and like you were saying that the reach for the mobile operators is huge, right? So when fintech comes into a country, it also has attached with it the economic prosperity with that. So what opportunities do you think this will bring into Pakistan, and how does this fintech going to be adding to the economic prosperity for us?
All right, let's take for example right now. If I wanted to sell, let's say, a pen to you right now, is there a mechanism by which you and me can have a transaction in Pakistan? Yes, there is. But we would have different conversations first, and that would lead to this. Or I'd have to set up a website and for you to be able to pay. Now, there are different types of things that would start happening. Not everyone is educated enough to create a website. I would say, if I were to say how many people in Pakistan, I'd say less than 10% can actually make a website or do transactions in a simple way right now, right? So the idea is to create simple solutions that work for everybody rather than just the educated part. And then you have to understand, if you're going to look at a population of 56% who can just sign their name and consider them educated, that's not going to cover everything that you need to do. So you need to look at the population which is actually educated, that will be able to do different transactions. And then the ones that are not fully literate, how will they be able to come and do transactions now? How does this impact the overall country in terms of growth? Number one, you start putting everything into an ecosystem. Funds stop going into circulation. Then, on top of that, you create marketplaces which allow for different types of trade to happen within the country. Then, at a later stage, you take it to an international level, and then you get individuals being able to sell goods internationally. And then you're getting foreign remittances coming into Pakistan, which are immediately being converted into PKR. So the country in itself is getting a larger forex holding. So there's a lot of things that will build up into the country's benefit if we go about it like this. Then we have to also look at what will they do for an individual. You see, if you start helping just each individual, it will result in the overall impact in the country, right? So now let's say I, as an individual, wanted to sell that pen to you. You made that purchase. I received my money. Now I have enough money immediately to go start making another sale. The speed of transaction becomes faster. That again becomes a very important factor, because otherwise the time to market also takes a lot of work. Now I can simply go on a Facebook page. I can advertise that I'm trying to sell X, Y, and Z. And in turn, when I do that, I send the person a receipt saying, I've sent the product to you, please send the money to me. And the transaction can happen. And now borders become much smaller. The geographic distances become smaller as well. So you can actually sell someone sitting something from Karachi to someone in Islamabad without any problems. And all of this happens through different technologies that are in the financial space.
Absolutely. And you also talk a little bit about foreign remittances. So I'd also like you to share, since you've been in this arena for longer. So how do you think is the Pakistani ecosystem ready to receive these foreign remittances? What are the regulations that apply to it? And how can we make sure that it goes seamlessly for everyone?
You see, there's a lot of regulatory discussions that we'd have to have for that to be discussed, and that is something very that I don't think this hour will cut it. But what I will say is that, you see, when financial transactions are happening across borders, there is a lot more risk. There's a lot of more KYC that requires to be done. There's a lot more information that needs to be taken, because otherwise, then if you leave it very open, you're going to have a lot of problems in the country in terms of, you know, people sending money illegally. There'll be lots of funds which are not clean, which will be being sent across different corridors, and you don't want to have that happen. However, things that you do want to happen is that what is actually currently happening in the market, you want to regularize it. You want to have things come through a proper channel. You want them to land in a wallet. You want them to land into an account. And you want them to stop the Havala system. Why is the Havala system such a bad thing? The Havala system is not always used for bad means. It's sometimes actually used for normal things as well. But the problem with Havala is that it does allow for the wrong things to happen. Now, why do people continue to want to use that system? People who are not doing anything wrong want to continue to use that system because it's cheaper, more trustworthy, and that is what comes into play over here. Now, if I'm sending money from Dubai to Pakistan, I want to know the instant I've sent the money is received in Pakistan, so that I'm not worried about that money going over. Then I'm worried about being able to actually send that money. So how do I send it? What is the means of doing it? How much work does it take me to do to send money? Do I have to go to someone's office? Do I have to go to a branch to actually go deposit cash and then see how that cash will flow to Pakistan? And when does my family in Pakistan get it? Or alternatively, that I send money from there and my family member in Pakistan gets the message immediately saying that they've received the funds, and then you take it from there. You see, that entire cycle being shortened and being confirmed to the customer will make him more happy and more trusting of the mechanism to go through. And that's another thing that comes in. Initially, you will see that the transactions will be much smaller. And as the trust factor grows, the customers will start sending more money through these channels and they will trust it more. So that is the key thing that will change when you start using foreign currencies through these different channels and you start regulating them in a way that customers are comfortable and at the same time things are happening in real time.
Yeah, and you see that the timelines will be reduced in like sending money from abroad, because currently it takes like a couple of days. So do you think you see it being reduced in the coming days?
That's not necessarily accurate that it takes a number of days. It depends on the way that you send it and the amounts that you're sending. There are certain regulations behind how much you can send, how much. Sending money out of Pakistan is a challenge, but sending money to Pakistan is not such a big challenge. So the timelines have reduced significantly. You can also send money instantly and will be received from whether you're sending it from the UAE, from the US or the UK or wherever. But the thing that is important is that trust factor that needs to come in and kick in as well. You see, not everyone is trusting of the system just yet. And that is the key thing that will be the responsibility of the fintechs and the banks and the financial institutions to actually make customers more comfortable and trusting of the financial industry itself. And that will come with two, three factors. That is not just simply focused on just the technology, it is also focused on education, educating the customer, making him understand what is the process and why, if there is a delay, there is a delay, and what is the mechanism to actually work through if there is a problem over there. Because right now, if God forbid something gets stuck, an uneducated person gets into a massive issue that he can't figure out where he's supposed to go with what in order to get it resolved. And right, so from that perspective, even though it might be a simple system, but because of the lack of education, it can be scary.
Great. And also, like you talk about literacy and you talk about having confidence in making the transactions. So we also often hear about the online attacks and frauds every now and then, and even big names like big banks in Pakistan that I'd like not like to name right now, but they are no strangers to these attacks as well. So what do you think, like, as an emerging market, how is Pakistan ready for this in terms of fintech?
One thing that Pakistan does have is great technology. It would be wrong of us to say otherwise. So yes, there are challenges with attacks, cyber attacks, and whatnot, and that is something which has been there since the inception of the first virus, or from the time the internet was has come in. It's something which is there. But you need to be prepped for it. You need to start to stay aligned with the latest of technologies. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to create firewalls and different mechanisms to actually protect all of this data. But at the end of the day, the major issue is not actually the cyber attacks on the banks and the systems. It's the cyber attacks that are done to malign customers. That is sending fake messages, making fake calls, and lying to the customers. So the customers need to always remember that they should never, ever share their personal information on a phone call or a message or an email. All that information, if there is required, will actually never be asked from you by an employee. That information is only taken on the system directly from the customer, and that's how it's extended. Daily, you receive messages to, even if you just forget bank frauds or financial technology frauds, you'll see frauds which are happening on your telcos as well. What happens is that telcos, different individuals will send messages to other individuals and say, type this code in to win 10,000 rupees or get X and Y. Whereas that's actually a code to transfer credit from one phone to another. Now, that within itself isn't the fraud that needs to be caught. And as we progress in that section, we will see that it's an important factor that the government sets certain stricter rules on things like this, where if someone is caught sending such a message or there is any sort of leakage in these type of things, there will be harsher fines or punishments. You could go to jail for something like that. So if we start doing that and we start putting checks on all of this, people will also become very cautious of giving cell phone SIMs on their name to someone else, and that will also resolve a lot of issues. Right now, When we talk about cell phone numbers, majority of the people have 5 SIMs under one name, and those are distributed within the family, right? So you don't want to do that either anymore. You want to actually have each SIM under each individual's name, so that whoever is actually creating those fake SIMs and sending those fake messages can be caught, and that can be stopped. I think the government has taken a great step over the last couple of years where they've actually biometrically verified each SIM. So now you have mechanisms to actually catch individuals, and you can get to the bottom of it. You can find the groups that are doing it, and then you can actually uh, get a lot more information out and stop all of these petty crimes which are happening in this cyberspace.
Yeah, and I think it's also a little a responsibility lies on the telcos or the microfinance wallets that they need to sort of empower or educate the citizens or the users to not share their personal information because, like I said, education is the main factor that sort of gives them the literacy to not share their personal information, and they always fall prey to these scams and frauds. So
It's
we
not
would.
just the education factor. I would actually add on over here that there are different mechanisms that fintechs and banks need to take in order to protect those customers. You see, now subject to the type of customer, that, like I said, one size does not fit everyone, right? So you need to create different products for different segments, right? When you say, okay, there's a person who's literate, how literate is the person? How technologically literate is the person? Is the person going to be? So you can actually categorize them, and based on that, the customer should be made to understand what is the level of risk he's taking by exposing himself. That means that maybe, for instance, you could say, okay, your transaction, because you're literate, will happen instantly, and you bear the risk. But there is another customer who's not fully literate and says, I don't want to take the risk, so delay my transactions by an hour. Any transaction I do, say that yes, the transaction has been processed, but don't credit it. Wait for it, right? So in case there's within that period, the customer gets a message and he can call the bank or the EMI and get put a hold on that transaction. And then you can go through different processes to actually improve that. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and different. We need to look at how we can help rather than always pointing fingers here or there. We also need to do a lot of things to help the population.
Absolutely, absolutely. Awais, what do you think are the greatest upcoming trends in the fintech that we need to look forward to, and how the markets are going to change in 2020? What is it that you see happening?
Well, in terms of the trends, what I see is a lot more people are going to start doing digital transactions. Hopefully, and that is going to require an ecosystem to be created. Different things will start moving away from cash-based transactions to your digital transactions. Digital transactions will lead to being able to reduce, in my opinion, at least the cost of doing business. When you reduce the cost of doing business, then you can actually reduce. Well, you have two options. You can stay at the same price, or you can also reduce the costs for the end consumer. You reduce the cost for the end consumer, there'll be a higher demand. There'll be a lot more people who will be able to afford the solution. So there's going to be a lot of things which are going to come in. The factor that we've been discussing is education, and that's going to play a key role in getting all of this going as well. So as and when we get to those different stages, we'll be able to grow different things. And by that, if the one place I do think that there's a lot of space to play is going to be how we take this globally. What are we going to do on that front? The question that will come into play is also, what are we doing on cryptocurrencies? How are we going to be going into the digital currency space? Are we going to go? Is it smart to go? Is it not to go? That's a very big debate which is happening across the world. Uh, because at the end of the day, it's so anonymous, and there could be so many things that could go wrong with it. But at the same time, it's so it's such an impressive piece of technology that, do you really want to let go of it, or do you need to regulate it? How much do you regulate it? How do you regulate it? How do you manage it? There's so many things that come into play over here. It's impossible for me, within my limited information, to even get to that stage of responding to that. So they'll and me being from the financial sector, saying that it's so limited information. Imagine the ones who are actually sitting discussing it day after day, trying to figure out the right way to actually go through this entire problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think in the future transactions across geographies will be happening through cryptocurrency?
They're happening today. It's not about the future. They do happen. different companies have started accepting. You can actually go to some stores in the well, in not the, I'm not sure anymore if they'll be accepting, but some universities also accept your tuition fee via cryptocurrency. So it depends. There's a lot of things behind it. The only thing is, what people don't understand, and which is the bigger challenge, is how do these cryptocurrencies values change? There's a demand and supply. Yes, that's one factor to it. But what about the other ones? What is the white paper behind them? What is the concept of each one? How will they get more value, and what will be the impact? Yes, it's a little bit like stocks, but there's a lot more behind it. And at the same time, sometimes there's just nothing. It's just a trend. So, so you talk about cryptocurrencies, you talk about NFTs. NFTs is a completely new field. You're talking about non-fungible tokens. How would that work? How are the different metaverses which are going to connect to each other? What are the applications in those metaverses? And what is the overall impact that you're going to get through it? So there's so much to do right now. And the financial industry is just scratching the surface still. There's so much to do. There's so many things that will keep changing. And frankly speaking, by the time the next generation comes in and takes over, might be completely something new. Nobody thought of cryptocurrency. We knew they would go digital, but when we thought digital money, we thought digital banking. But when you started moving into a different currency type, then you were saying, what are currencies backed by? You speak about currencies being backed by gold for a majority of the countries, but is that true still? Not necessarily, right? So you have to start looking at all the things that are going to change, and what is it going to be? What is the currency? At the end of the day, the currency might just be water. Where the depletion of drinking water, that might just be your next currency, or even time. Those are things which will impact things in the future, and that's what's going to be very important for you to look at.
Wow, that's a very different take. And I think we've discussed a lot about finances and fintech and all of that. We'd also like to know, Awais, how you got to where you are currently. And I'm sure you've had mentors, or you've had guidance from people. So I really want to know what your take is on mentoring. Like, what do you think about having mentoring in one's life? Because, like I said, Curious is that platform that connects the apprentices to correct mentors in their life, and they give them guidance, and they share their value and learnings. So I'd also like to know your take on how you think mentoring is important in one's personal journey.
Look, if I were to start everything from scratch, I would not be anywhere, because then I'd keep reinventing the wheel, and that's something you want to avoid doing. You want to look at history. You want to look at what people can share with you, and you want to get past different things that they've gotten past spending 10 years working on, where by just listening to them, you can get past that problem in 1 minute, right? So that is the key thing that comes in over here. And you need to remember that it doesn't mean that it's just the mentor. It could be anyone who could actually help you with that information. But having it said that, mentoring has great advantages. You go to product specialists, you go to industry specialists, and you understand what they've gone through. You understand how to look at things. You might be looking at one item in a particular way, but they might have seen it from a different perspective, and those perspectives put together actually are what take you to progress. If like I said, if you start trying to reinvent the wheel every time, you go first to a triangle wheel or a square wheel or whatever, and then you'll eventually come to the circle. Now, do you want to just jump that entire 100 years of moving from one type of wheel to another to just the round wheel now and move forward? So that gives you that advantage that you've taken everything from someone who's already spent their lives working on that particular item and move forward. So, in my opinion, mentoring has been very important. I have had a number of people throughout my career who have taught me, and throughout my life. At the end of the day, the first teacher that comes into your life is your mentor. He is teaching you different things that he already knows, and those things are very useful as you go forward. Language, otherwise, at the end of the day, we wouldn't probably even have proper sign language. We'd be still going whatever in the caveman times, right? So it's important to have your mentors there. It's important to look at not just mentors, but also look at different competitors in your industry. Look at the history of how they've grown in that particular segment. Take learnings from them and then apply them to your own businesses, your own selves, your own work on a daily basis, and you'll be able to progress further much faster. And that's why it's so important to maintain history of different things and move forward from there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you'd also agree that the best people out there, they're mentors, not managers.
Well, the best people out there, a manager at the end of the day is also a mentor in a way, right?
Absolutely.
So he might not be teaching you the subject at hand, but he's teaching you how to manage people at the end of the day too. So in a way, your manager is your mentor, and sometimes your the person working under you might be the person actually mentoring you as well, because he might be sharing some information with you. So it depends on how you want to look at it. And the thing, my only advice to this is never be shy to ask a question. It could be the stupidest question, but once you've asked it, at least you've gotten beyond that point. And once you've gotten beyond that point, you can actually get better conclusions to what you're doing. So always ask the silly questions. Always ask the things that confuse you. And when you do that, you will hopefully step away a much smarter, much more progressive person, and you'll probably be able to do much greater in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that, I think we'd also like to know that what is that one piece of advice that you were given in your life and that has stuck with you ever since?
One piece of advice that, well, the one piece of advice is always ask those silly questions, and that is something actually a teacher said to me in the fourth grade, and that is what I'm repeating to you at this stage as well, because asking those silly questions gets you the answers that you need, and sometimes asking the simplest of questions also gets you an answer that you weren't expecting. There's a lot of times where we've gone and asked the wrong questions and gotten the right answers. So it's very important to ask those questions. You never know what you're going to learn, and how you use that learning is going to be very important as well. So that's what I would say at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because we're receiving a lot of questions in the comment section and we'd like to move to that as well. So, just one last question from my side would be that one piece of advice that you would give to the entrepreneurs in the finance sector.
There's a lot of space to play. Don't worry about the competition. Keep going. There's so much more to do. The world has a very large population which is unbanked. There is a million use cases out there. We all will do our part, and as we do these parts, we will hopefully always contribute towards society, and that will in turn change our own lives. Don't just look at it from the smaller picture that, oh, this is what we need to achieve, but look at the broader picture. When you achieve that, what is the impact that comes to your life? So if I improve the saving index of Pakistan, I will improve my own life, because at the end of the day, uh, the society will change. It will become better. People will live better lives. You won't be going on the streets and seeing people in bad conditions. Hopefully, we will be able to get the right charities to the right individual who actually needs it, and we will be able to build from there. And it will help everyone rather than just yourselves. So society at large is the beneficiary owner of what we're doing today. So always remember that and put more efforts to it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful advice that you've shared. I'm going to go ahead and start including the questions that we've received. Osama is saying that what are some of the good examples where government policies in the region are supporting digital fintech products and what can other governments learn from them?
In terms of our government, they're doing great work. You have to understand an EMI license has now become a thing where there are now 10 EMIs which have applied to them. Some of them have initial principal approvals in place. Then they will progressively go through their different stages to get to a point where they can actually do commercial sales as well. There's digital bank licenses which are being looked at. They're looking at ways of how to increase financial inclusion. They're trying to make mechanisms which are allowing for the unbanked to come into this segment. There are different things which are happening within the taxation pieces, which will also require some further work from the government to educate individuals that by coming into the financial ambit, you're not necessarily always going to get taxed. There are other benefits, and what are the benefits of that taxation as well? We have a lot of people who are illiterate and who are worried about the taxation part. As these things start becoming better aligned, people will come more into the tax ambit. And as they do, you will have a lot more money for the government to actually improve things in Pakistan on the overall. Other governments are following us, and we are following other governments as well. Our regulator is actually a very progressive regulator, and I'm having had worked with them throughout my career. I think that there's a lot of things that we've done right, and there's a lot of things that we will continue to learn from as well from other markets, and we'd like to pick up best practices. For example, in our regulations for lending, we have something called a debt burden ratio. A debt burden ratio is to manage that an individual does not get more than 50% of his lending, then his income, so that he can actually affordably repay that loan rather than going into default. So there's a lot of things that the government is doing. There's a lot of things that will continue to happen. And there's a lot of things that we will be able to help the government with as we progressively learn more from the markets.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Osama. We'll be moving on to the next question. We have Anam who's asking, do you think tapping into the female rural population in Pakistan will be a challenge, and how do you plan on addressing that?
Tapping the female population in Pakistan will always be a challenge, not just in the rural, but also in the urban areas, because there are certain cultural issues which are there. We need to break through, and we need to, instead of trying to change the culture, understand how we can work with it. Now, with digital onboarding, this makes it a massive impact on everything. So, if you've got digital onboarding happening now, the benefit that you have is very simply that you don't have to actually meet the customer physically. Now, that is one of the bigger problems that's been there. Now, when you've got females now being able to actually operate their accounts without actually meeting an individual, that becomes very powerful. Now, that's the first step. You've got a wallet. Now, the second step is now they've got communication tools which are across the board available. You've got your WhatsApps, you've got your millions of chat softwares which are there. Now, you can start doing transactions. You want to go buy goods, you can order goods online, get those delivered. Now, your standard grocery store, which is around the corner, instead of having to send your child to go pick it up with cash, you can actually send your child, bring the goods, and transfer the money. So there's more securitization in there. This will lead to people understanding that now we can actually sell other goods. We can make things. This will give rise to SMEs, your small and medium enterprises. And the female population, like I mentioned, is nearly 50% of your population of Pakistan. And if they're not working, you're not going to succeed. It's a very simple formula. Unless everyone is putting their efforts towards the progress of Pakistan, it's not going to happen. And if you've neglected 50% of that, you're just making a big mistake as a country. So we need to make sure that as Pakistanis, we encourage the female population to come into this segment, into this complete ambit. They should have access to finance. They should be able to take out loans on their own. Right now, there's so many different things which cause so many different problems. And as we encourage more females to come into this play, there'll be more females in the workplace. They will go to meet those other females to get those accounts and to get those wallets into place, to give them more SIMs, give them more access to information. At the end of the day, when a mother is more getting access to all of this, she's going to start slowly educating herself. As she educates herself, the next generation is going to get educated. And that's how this will trickle down. Maybe not, we might not see it in our time, but the next generations will be much better than ours. And that's important thing to leave behind. And that's important to remember that our children will be able to enjoy that and our grandchildren. So that is where we want to leave the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another question that we've received it since a lot of population of Pakistan, if I talk about Pakistan specifically, it's uneducated, and in addition to being uneducated, they're poor as well. So how do you gain the trust of these people to sort of invest in digital technology for saving their finances or just making financial transactions?
Okay, so let's take the first step. First, you need to educate them. Now, how do you educate them? How do you build that trust? That trust is going to not happen overnight. That is going to take some time. And that is something that you need to work with. How do you do that? You start first looking at how you can create use cases for those individuals to actually manage what they do on a daily basis, where they see an actual saving. I'm not just going to go do something new because it's new. That's where you come into places where you've got more education, where you say, oh, this is new, this might actually help me in the future. You need to show them real benefits of how they're going to have improvements in their lives. It could be as simple as your money gets stolen, it's still safe. Your phone gets stolen, your money's safe. Number two, discounts on different things that they would be buying. Return benefits, ease of calculation. There's so many things, but the use case has to be real, not something that we just throw out there because, oh, it's there. We will help you save money by doing your transaction over here. We need to drop those charges behind it. We need to work through all of that detail too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. Thank you for sharing your insights. Another question that we have is from Joanna. She wants to know that anyone who's starting out in the fintech space for like as their job, what is your tip or your advice to them? Somebody who's a recent graduate or a current student.
Look at things around you. There is no limitations of what you can do. All right. At one point, we always thought cash would be the way of paying it out. You have access to the latest of technologies, and you have access to the latest of trends. You understand things much better than I will understand in terms of technology, even though I'm from the technology space. So look at real things. Don't just close yourself into this box that we've been creating for ourselves. That this is the regulation. This is what needs to work. Even the regulations can be changed. Everything can change. So my advice to you is look at actual use cases from your daily lives and see what problems you can solve. Find a problem, find a solution. You can actually be very successful. If you're trying to join a fintech, there's always space for new ideas. So if you go to someone with an idea that can be developed, believe me, everyone's going to be more interested in taking you on board irrespective.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that we have is from Anik. He says, do you think in the near future, will it get easier for us to send money outside Pakistan?
Uh, you see, now the challenge of sending money outside Pakistan is not just the factor of what the regulation is covering. It's not just sending it. Sending it is not a problem. It's actually the regulatory body that covers it, and that's also to do with how our financial situation in the country is. As we progressively improve the saving index, how we reduce the funds in circulation, and as our reserves become larger, the country will probably ease the way that you would want to go forward with it. Now, that's very important for all of this. Now, as we're progressively moving through this entire cycle, I predict that in the future, when we start doing transactions globally, they will become easier. But do I think Pakistan is going to ease in those rules anytime soon? I would not think so. It will take a while before our financial stability improves and we are okay with spending foreign currency without hesitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question that we've received is that the policymakers, what is their take on the issues that are being faced by the fintech companies in Pakistan? Are they addressing the issues? Are they open to introducing policies that are more flexible?
Let's first of all understand policymakers are also humans. Okay, they're also trying to resolve the problem. They're not trying to be the problem, but they have to take a much more cautious approach. We take a much more aggressive approach because we take it from a business perspective. They take it from a consumer protection perspective. So you need to always understand they are also humans and they're also doing a particular segment of their job, right? They're trying to be right. They're not in opposition to trying new ideas. And I think what I've seen with the regulator, with State Bank in particular, having worked with them in the past and knowing some of the people who are working there currently, I've seen that they've been very progressive. They're open to trying new things. They're open to trying things where they can do different tests, achieve results, and then move forward. The process is slow. So just to turn around and point a finger at the regulator is incorrect to do. And the policymakers are trying their level best because the better they make the policies, the better they're aligned, the more progress will be seen in the country. It's not an easy solution and it's not an easy problem to resolve, right? So let's give credit where it's due. They have come up with things, and lots of things have changed in the last 4 years. If you look at from the very EMI licensing mechanism to the digital banks to how banks are approaching things, how from, if you remember back in the day, I'm not even also talking too far back, it would take up to 40 to 50 days to open an account. You've got your Asan account, which opens instantly. You've got your wallets, which open instantly. So the regulator is encouraging. But there are also challenges which are there, which are on both fronts, on the regulation side as well as the business side. Certain things are possible, certain things are not possible. So yes, in my opinion, the regulator and the policymakers are trying to do their best. And with them, we need to also put in our part, which is we need to suggest things. We need to come up with different ways to work both angles, the business angle as well as the regulation angle.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We're also receiving a lot of praise in the comment section. Everyone's finding this session very, very insightful. So, Avais,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for that. And I think this is about it. We're exactly on time, and I really didn't have to see where the time went. It just passed in conversation, and I've had a very sort of uh, very educating sort of a discussion. And Avais, thank you so much for being a part of this. And we wish Happe all the best. And
Thank you.
we'd love to see more of you on Curious. This is a platform where we connect apprentices with mentors, and they get bite-sized learning. And I think you'd understand that we're also putting them through with different projects where they can have earning opportunities as well. So I'd also like to say that Curious is also playing like a small part in empowering recent graduates in giving them earning possibilities.
It's fantastic, and I think that's the way to go. And education is very important for our country, and the access to things, the access to information, is the real game. At the end of the day, I'm actually sorry I missed a complete point. Time and water might be, but data, data is your currency now. Data is one of the biggest currencies, and that is the information. We are in the information time. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely, I
Information
agree.
is important. Thank you.
Yes, great. So that's about it. We have Anam who's saying it's a brilliant session. Bilal is also saying that this is excellent. And yeah, Asad is also saying this is super insightful. Thank you everyone for joining in. For everyone who joined in today, I just want to say that we're conducting these workshops more often. They're available on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. We also have a lot of learning streams on our website. We have the different options that we have been shared in the comment section. Just go and browse and see what works for you, and just come on and start your learning journey with us. And Avais, thank you so much again for being a part of this. It was lovely having you here. This was a very, very insightful session, and we'd love to see more of you on our platform, because I think the apprentices on our platform will benefit from the experience that you bring in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Mariam is also saying that it's an amazing session. Rohit is also saying this is a great session. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And see you guys soon with another workshop. Thank you, Oves.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.